Hi, welcome to the Occupy Ukiah report. We're shooting on March 5th, 2012. You'll be seeing this on March 8th, I believe. This is Charlie Vaughn talking to you from the Channel 3 studios. We've got Greg Simsick in the booth today, and we'll be having Diane Durham on joining us from Ukiah Aware. Should be an interesting show. We'll start out with a little update about what Occupy Ukiah has been up to lately. We're still working on foreclosures. It's kind of a long, slow process. We had a couple of our members go to the Board of Supervisors meeting, and it looks like one of the best routes to unraveling the foreclosure mess is to have volunteers from the community, and that could be you, volunteer to be trained as an auditor to learn how to go through the information on somebody's mortgage. Maybe it would be yours, maybe a friend's, maybe a family member, and so then you could unravel some of the illegalities and irregularities that have been filed with a lot of these foreclosures. So that looks like it's the route that we're going to be taking is training volunteers to do these audits, because what we've been asking for is we've been asking for the county or the state to hold a moratorium on foreclosures until there is an audit. Well, they said it's very unlikely there's going to be a moratorium on foreclosures, and it's not very likely there's going to be an audit because audits cost money. And there's not a lot of state money available these days. So we will be updating everybody when we get a little more information on how to go about volunteering to be Mendocino County volunteer auditor. And that's how we're going to deal with the foreclosures at present. And we have a couple members, Tom Ray and Jim Stepler, from the Occupy Ukiah group, have been working with a couple of the Board of Supervisors members, and they're going to be proceeding. They're going to be working on it together, and we'll see how it proceeds from there. We're also working on, at our last meeting, we talked about having a rapid response ability for Occupy Ukiah. So if a big topic comes up, if there's a big event that needs to have a group respond, our group respond, then we want to set up a mechanism by which we can say, everybody call the mayor, or everybody call the governor, or whatever. Everybody call the White House, which is a good thing to do. So we're working on that, and we'll be updating you hopefully next week with some information on how, even if you don't really participate a lot in Occupy Ukiah, how you can at least be a part of our rapid response. We're also working on sending a letter to the White Plains, New York District Attorney. Now, this is regarding a case regarding a man named Kenneth Chamberlain, who Diana and I will probably be talking about that a little bit later on in the show. Kenneth Chamberlain, real briefly, was a 68-year-old man with a heart condition who accidentally tripped his little alert locket that he carries. That you can push the button, your medical alert button, and it alerts the company that holds that that you're connected to. Then they call in and say, "Are you okay?" If they don't get a response, they send an ambulance to your house, or they send some sort of authorities. In this case, the police showed up at his house. He tripped it accidentally. He told the police who were at his door, "I'm okay. I don't need you." The events ensued, and he ended up getting tased and shot to death by the police in response to a medical alert. We'll be talking about that a little later in depth, but we're planning as an Occupy group to send a letter to the White Plains District Attorney in protest of how this case was handled by the police and how it's been handled by the authorities on down the line. This happened in November, and it has yet to go to a grand jury, and the shooter has yet to even been named publicly. Anyway, that's about all we'll talk about on that for now. Also, Occupy Ukiah was involved in a big all-humanity march that we had here last Saturday. So you'll be seeing this on Sunday, so it was actually a week ago last Saturday. And you probably saw it in the Ukiah Journal. The headlines were, "We are marching for our lives. Community turns out for rally." It was quite successful. We had close to 100 people show up. Occupy Ukiah was involved in making signs and part of the march. And we were marching in unity with the Ukiah Aware group, which we'll be talking with Diane Durham from Ukiah Aware here in just a few minutes. And that was a very successful march, and the sun even came out during the middle of it on a rainy, cold day. So we had a really, really good experience, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later. For one of our main headlines today, I want to come back to the situation in Fukushima, Japan. The reactors in Japan, as we all know, were damaged by the earthquake and tsunami. And I'm pulling it up here on my computer so I can read it to you. I got an email from my friend the other day, and she came up with some new information about the Fukushima disaster. And you see a picture on the screen there of a hand holding up a radiation monitoring device. And they have now found that the levels have gone off the charts. It's a lot worse than previously thought, and this is no surprise. Let me read a little bit from this email that I got. I have just completed reading the Cecile Pineda's book that I got called Devil's Tango, How I Learned the Fukushima Step by Step. She was the elder sitting across from my friend at a dinner table who read from her book at the event. From page 189 of the book, The Devil's Tango, How I Learned the Fukushima Step by Step, she writes, "At the time of the earthquake on March 11th, which destroyed all 6 reactors at the Fukushima site, Unit 4 was being refueled at the time of the earthquake. Reports began to surface as early as December 5th that Unit 4 had lost its south side wall." That's December 5th of 2011. This is much later after the disaster. On December 2nd, beside Reactor 4, something like a fire was observed on camera. So since that time, a strong light has been set towards the Fukuichi webcam oversight project as if to hide something by whiteout. So there's a constant webcam on these reactors that you can see online, but on unit number 4, they have a very bright light that is apparently trying to obscure your view of what's going on there. In an interview with Tom Hartman, Paul Gunter, director of Beyond Nuclear's Reactor Oversight Project, stated that Unit 4 is beginning to look more and more like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. The whole building is listing. If the building falls, and if the fuel rods spill onto the ground, disaster will ensue and contaminate Tokyo and Yokohama. The security of the neighboring countries and the world will be in jeopardy. This is new information coming to light. Nobody should be surprised that this is happening. They have not been honest with us from the beginning, and to be honest with you, no nuclear organizations are honest with the public. They cannot tell us the depth of the danger of this technology, if people honestly knew how dangerous this technology is and actually how close we are to an incredible disaster, we would not allow it as a public. So as a result, they don't tell us the truth. They just want us to leave it in their hands, trust them, just chill out, it's all under control. Well, what we're finding now is unit number 4, which is up there on the screen. That's what's left of the building. That's what Mother Nature does when we think we've got it all planned out. We've got our reactor all tight. We know our job, and we're pumping out electricity, and we're doing good work for the public. And suddenly, there's a big earthquake, and look what happens. All of the politicians and representatives from the nuclear industry will tell you that the reactors presently operating in the United States and here in California, here on the West Coast, are perfectly safe, that they are built to withstand any earthquake that we might encounter or any tsunami that we might encounter. Well, that is also what the Japanese thought. And that's what they would have told you up until the last hour before the earthquake, that they had it under control and they had it planned out. They had walls up, planning in case of a tsunami. But they didn't have big enough walls for this tsunami. And that is what you can never, ever predict when it comes to Mother Nature or human behavior. Humans are prone to huge mistakes. Mother Nature is prone to throwing enormous curveballs at us that we never expected. And lo and behold, that's what's happened in Japan. And a lot of us think, oh, it's way over there in Japan. It's across the ocean. When it comes to nuclear radiation, it's in our backyard. It is not way over across the ocean. They have already been finding debris that has been floating around out in the ocean, reaching our shores. People try not to talk about it. The authorities that find these things aren't telling us about it. And you can bet the news will be coming out in the future. I just heard recently that a fishing boat that was swept away by the tsunami recently reached the shores of state of Washington. There's no prediction. So that is what came in the email. And let me give you a little more information from a site called commondreams.org regarding the state of the Fukushima reactors today. It says radiation levels inside Fukushima reactor number 2 have reached fatally high levels, and levels of water are far lower than previously thought, experts said today. And I believe this was in March, around March 25th, I believe. It's very recent, it's within the last few weeks. The current radiation levels are so high that even robots cannot enter, the TEPCO says. They say that new robots and equipment will be needed to be developed to deal with the lethal levels of radiation. TEPCO spokesperson Junichi Matsumoto told the Associated Press, "We have to develop equipment that can tolerate high radiation when locating and removing the melted fuel during decommissioning." So they have a lot of melted fuel that is still remaining in these reactors, and they need to remove it. Well, the radiation is so high that it's deteriorating the robots before they can even do the work, much less humans. People who were just in the area. You might have seen earlier that picture of the gloved hand holding up the dose meter. That's as close as people dare get, and they're in full radiation suits. At 10 times the lethal dose, the radiation levels are at their highest point yet. Higher than they were a year ago when this disaster hit. And there's no guarantee that they won't get any higher. It's only been a year. This stuff is deadly for tens of thousands of years. Some of these isotopes are deadly for 500,000 years. It's only been 1 year. This incident has only begun. We have only got storage facilities capable of storing things that are as safe as we can make them for 100 years. 100 is not even the blink of an eye. At the current level of 73 sieverts, the data gathering robots can only stand 2 to 3 hours of exposure. But Tsuyoshi Mitsuwa, a reactor physics and engineering professor at Kyoto University Research and Reactor Institute, told the Japan Times 2 or 3 hours would be too short. At least 5 or 6 hours would be necessary to do the work that they need these robots to do. He added that the shallowness of the water is a surprise and the radiation level is awfully high. The operator of Japan's, that's page 3, let's go to page 2. The reactor radiation is too high for access. Radiation inside reactor 2 containment vessel at the Fukushima number 1 plant has reached a lethal 73 sieverts per hour, and any attempt to send robots in will require them to have greater resistance than currently available. We've already gone through that. We'll skip that page. It's a little bit redundant. So on page 3 here, and this is our last page we'll read from here, probe finds the high radiation in damaged Fukushima reactor. The operator of Japan's crippled Fukushima nuclear plant has said damage to one of the reactors is much worse than previously thought. On Tuesday, workers managed to insert a probe into reactor number 2 for only the second time since the disaster. So in a year, they were only able to put this probe in there twice. They know very little about what's actually going on inside. The radiation was up to 10 times the fatal dose, the highest yet recorded at that plant. The level of water cooling the melted down nuclear fuel was also far lower than expected. The other 2 melted down reactors, which are yet to be examined closely, could be in an even worse state, our correspondent adds. I'm only reading this to encourage all of us to do whatever we can. Look up greenpeace.org, go to a report called Lessons from Fukushima. You have to punch that in on their little search window, and there's a 52-page report that we talked about in our last show. I really encourage people to read that. I really encourage you to call your senators, call the White House, express your concern, express how dangerous this technology is, and these few reactors in Japan are threatening the environment of our planet. If we were to have another major earthquake near one of these other reactors in our country or another one, things could really get out of control fast. If it was in our neighborhood, one of our local reactors, suddenly you would not be able to drink your water, you would not be able to eat your local food, drink the milk, breathe the air, garden in the soil. It would suddenly be a very, very close to home experience. It's what people are dealing with in Japan today. I encourage people, if you want to get involved, come to one of our meetings. Look up some of the people who are involved in nuclear activity these days. I'm trying to think of the word, who are countering the nuclear activity these days, and get in touch with them. I don't want to take up much more time on this. We'll come back to it at another day. I want to get Diane Durham on with us today. We're going to talk about the march that we had on Saturday. We're going to talk about her organization. Come on up, Diane. Ukiah Aware. And Diane is also a member of the Ukiah Occupy group.
Hi, Charlie.
Hi, Diane. And so we've been working together for about 6 months now, and maybe you can just tell us a little bit something about the Ukiah Aware group and how it started and what it does.
Well, Ukiah Ware is a small production company, and the inspiration behind that really is my passion, my desire to facilitate people being authentic, people being able to be authentic without fear of being, how can I say, targeted in any way. So, the inspiration goes back to a few years back. I was working a job in Ohio, and I just felt totally like a fish out of water, and I made the decision to do something differently, and I moved out here to Mendocino County, and after some time, some thoughts came and some things started to develop, and I got some ideas around productions that could really help the community to become aware of ourselves and of each other.
What kind of productions are we talking about?
Well, they're all artistic and educational, so it's kind of a neat combination of art and reasoning. And they deal with, for the next couple of years, the productions that are planned address various forms of prejudice, or what I like to call profiling. So they deal with racism, sexism, ageism, classism, and ableism. So those are the productions, and it was the Dismantling Racism workshop, which happened in January, that sort of gave birth to this community group called CORE, C-O-R-P, which stands for Conversations on Race and Privilege. This group is continuing the conversation around race issues and privilege. And they now meet regularly. They have been meeting regularly since February to examine, I'm part of the group myself, so we examine our own assumptions about race, assumptions about white privilege. Those who are white in the group examine their assumptions about that. So we do some internal work, and we then do some external work. We discuss how we can creatively address issues of race in our community. So that's what CORE is about. So CORE is the community group. Ukiah Ware will continue to do productions, and the goal of each production is really to have some ongoing activity, so that at the end of the production, at the end of the night, the curtain doesn't just close and it's good night everybody, but there are ways provided or inspiration for ideas to keep ongoing activity in the community that addresses whatever issue is being dealt with.
I was at the first event that you had at the Saturday Afternoon Club.
Yeah.
And that was the Dismantling Racism.
Right.
And that was pretty cool. You had some actors who got up and did some little skits that pointed to situations where you find yourself face to face with racial issues and ism issues.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty cool because we had maybe 50 people in the room or something, a pretty good crowd of diverse people from Ukiah. And what I liked about it was these skits were an icebreaker. It was like, oh yeah, I've been in that situation before. And so then after that, we broke into smaller groups and talked about it individually.
Right.
And for me, I thought it was pretty effective. So is this the kind of thing you're thinking of having in the future? Have you got more things you want to throw in?
Yeah, each production is different. So, for instance, the production coming up is focusing on gender diversity and sexual orientation.
Right.
It's called Out and About. It's taking place in May. And again, it's got artistic components and educational components. So a little bit different. There won't be small group discussion so much, but there will be some real solid presentations on gender diversity and on sexual orientation. And then there will be some opportunity for members of the LGBTQ community to express artistically some things. So it should be a very interesting production. We're excited about it. the planning is underway. So
Now, if anybody who's watching today wanted to get involved in this, like, you know, maybe they'd say, "Ooh, I'd like to be in one of those skits," or "That's perfect for me." How would they do that?
they can give me a call. Call Ukiah Aware. The phone number is 707-234-7155. And we can talk about it. Let me know. We are certainly looking for people who are interested in participating, interested in helping out in any capacity. So that's exciting.
And that might even be if somebody was, you know, not interested in doing the acting, they might be interested in maybe script writing or giving out ideas for scenarios or things like that.
Yes, we are coming sort of to the close. We're trying to sort of wrap up our planning of this and really. But I mean, we are trying to put the finishing touches. You know, if anyone's interested in script writing, you need to call right away.
Right away.
Right away.
Okay.
But if you have an interest, please call 234-7155.
Great. So let's see. We put up some little bullet points. We wanted to make sure we talked about certain things. So, you know, we could talk about what are some of the internal questions that CORE's been dealing with. What are some of the issues? What's been making it go?
Well, we have looked at, people have talked about the whole issue of invisibility, you know. So, you know, why do me personally, Diane Durham, sometimes feel invisible? Or why have I felt that way in the past? And people have talked about what makes us overlook people, what makes us not really tune in to who people are, to their presence and to what they bring. And again, I use that word profiling or stereotyping. They're very similar words where we allow those stereotypes to really control our interaction with people. And so kind of what's that all about? So we've talked about that. We've talked about sometimes the necessity to be validated by white culture, you know, people of color.
Right.
The need to be validated, and sort of acting in such a way that we get validation. So there's that. There's, you know, we've talked about the rules of racism, and that's sort of the unwritten rules.
Yeah.
And about the construct or the framework that's imposed on all of us about how we think about ourselves. So those are some of the internal things that we've done, and it's been very fruitful. There's some really good stuff that comes out, and I think that people are, the people who are in the group are eager to continue to look at these issues because it's empowering to begin to look at ourselves and to see more clearly what's been guiding our behavior.
So then this is a little bit different from the performance, the larger erasing racism. What was it called? Dismantling racism.
Yeah, dismantling racism.
And then this core group, then you're saying, is smaller. How many people are generally at one of these meetings?
There are about 12 to 15 active people.
Yeah.
There's a much larger list that I let know the meetings are happening, and we're sort of changing our format so that rather than meeting on the same day all the time, we're going to kind of rotate, switch it up so that we're meeting various days so that more and more people can
I've been one of those people.
Yeah,
I've been able to come to a couple, but boy,
we
get so busy.
Yeah, I mean, so again, CORE is something that is like the ongoing extension of Ukiah Aware.
Right.
It's like an arm of Ukiah Aware that's out in the community all the time. Ukiah Aware does these productions, sort of these one-time productions, and then CORE and hopefully other types of groups will be that extension, that ongoing piece.
Let's talk about some specifics here real quick. We've got a few more minutes. You know, of course, everybody knows about the Trayvon Martin situation. people aren't very aware of another one that we've been looking at is this man, Kenneth Chamberlain. I don't know if you want to talk about either of those or something else, or things that other people watching may have already heard about and may know about.
I think maybe rather than getting into the specifics of Trayvon Martin and Kenneth Chamberlain, these really tragic murders, I think I want to draw some real connection between these human rights issues and Occupy, the Occupy movement, because there's some real clear connection there.
Yeah.
And in my mind, the connection is that we derive our power, I believe, as people. We derive our power from really understanding our connection. When we understand, the power behind the Occupy movement, that 99% is what is really motivating and what really brings people together. When we see, okay, we're all in this boat, that's what fired up so many people to get out on the street. It's because they're like, yeah, I'm part of this group. We're all being messed over.
Yep.
And these human rights tragedies, Trayvon Martin, Kenneth Chamberlain, Shaima Alawati in San Diego, Muslim woman who was killed in her own home, beaten to death, and a note left on her saying, "Go back to Iraq, you terrorists," or something very similar to that.
Right.
Those are all, things that what I see is all of us need to see that that's us, that those are crimes against humanity.
Yep. And
to the extent that we find our power in connecting with each other, this Occupy movement can really be, it's really incredible to that extent that we do that. So the marches that we saw on the Brooklyn Bridge back in October, that can just be the beginning of people getting out and addressing the human rights issues, the nuclear issue that you were talking about, banking issues, foreclosure, education, all these things, they all affect us. And, that's sort of the piece that I'm trying to connect with the specific stories of Trayvon Martin and, Kenneth Chamberlain.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good way to approach it, because we could get into details on some of those stories. There may be details that not everybody's aware of, but I think we'd go on for another half hour or more.
We'll see. It'll be interesting, of course, to see what comes of these cases. I'm very glad that they're being followed so closely. I think that's great. And we need to keep the pressure on, and I think, folks, in whatever way folks can, keep the pressure on these cases and all cases. And if people hear about other injustices in your own local communities, get on the horn, the electronic horn called, the internet, and let people know what's going on so that these things can get some national recognition.
Yeah, and I think that's very important, because I know that looking back on my life, especially as a kid, I saw, back in the 60s and 70s, I saw a lot of things that today I would have stepped up and said, wait a minute, you can't say that, you can't do that. But as a young person growing up with that culture all around me, it was sort of like, oh, that's the way it is. I guess I better not, or I'd nervously laugh or whatever. And it's time for us to get beyond that.
Absolutely.
To speak up and say, you can't say that anymore.
Right.
You can't do that anymore.
Yeah, and I think the power behind this march that happened last weekend is that people, I think, feel a little bit stronger, a little bit more empowered to say, no, I don't like what you just said, or what you just said is very inappropriate. You need to look at what you just said and how damaging it is, or how untrue it is, or whatever. I think people feel stronger to do that, and that's good.
Great. Well, I think we'll leave it there, and definitely we can have you back as events unfold.
Sure.
If you're going to be coming up with another event coming up soon, do you have any idea about when that may be?
Absolutely.
You do?
Oh, you mean in terms of production, or in terms of
the next dismantling racism, or
well,
no, it's going to be the
Out and About.
Out and About, right?
Which is the production. It's an artistic and educational production about gender diversity and sexual orientation, and that's
Right.
happening Sunday, May 20th.
Okay.
Sunday, May 20th. It's in the afternoon from 2 to 5. It's going to be at the Ukiah United Methodist Church in their social hall, and
Right.
we're excited about that.
Well, we'll definitely get that information, if not you, back on here
Okay, great.
talking